welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Series 8 story, The Mummy on the Orient Express. Written by Jamie Matheson and is directed by Paul with Schlemish. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I've probably absolutely butchered that. I do apologise. This story is actually a story that has been teased in a prior series. In fact, Stephen Moffat's first series. At the end of the Big Bang, the Doctor gets a phone call in which he is instructed that there is a mummy on an Orient Express in space. And seemingly this ties into that idea of the Orient Express in space with a mummy. So it's an idea that has been in Stephen Moffat's head for a while. In fact, Stephen Moffat, basically James Matheson, he wrote a story for later on in the series called Flatline, and Stephen Moffat liked his writing, so he asked him to return to the series to write an episode prior, similar to how Neil Cross was treated in last season, in series 7. And essentially what Stephen Moffat did, he gave him the basic premise and the name of the episode he wanted, A Mummy on the Orient Express. And so Matheson engineered his story based around that idea. It also as well ties into the ending of Kill the Moon, the previous episode, in which the Doctor and Clara's relationship is fragile to the point where they're considering, or at least Clara anyway, is considering leaving the Doctor and their travelling adventures together. And it's really strange because at the start of this episode, they just sort of appear together in the story, in the situation, and nothing really is brought up a bit about it until about 10-20 minutes into the episode, where we do kind of learn that through like references that basically this was our characters' agreement. It's like their one last adventure, a goodbye to the good times sort of experience where they would go on one little, fun adventure. No aliens, no monsters, just a nice day out to say goodbye to each other, to say goodbye to all of these fantastic adventurous feats. And this story is also a tribute to Agatha Christie novels, especially, of course, Murder on the Orient Express, one of the most well-respected novels, and has been turned into films. Had many films adaptations based upon it. Most recently, a Kenneth Branagh adaptation with Johnny Depp in one of the lead roles. So it's a very big and important story, and Doctor Who is no stranger to Agatha Christie. Lots of Doctor Who stories, both classic series and revived series, have been inspired by Agatha Christie novels. Most noticeably when the Doctor actually met Agatha Christie in Unicorn and the Wasp. So it's something that's in familiar territory for Doctor Who. And again, this is something that has been criticised from Series 8 in every video I've done for Series 8. That kind of originality isn't there. However, in most cases, the big issue is that not only is it doing stuff that's been done before, but it has been done better. And here we might actually get a differentiator, because to basically spoil my opinions on this, I really enjoyed this episode. This is, in my opinion, the story that signified, what the hell, that doesn't even mean anything. To me, this is the story that places Peter Capaldi's 12th Doctor. This is the story that made me go, right, I see this era for what it is and what, the great aspects of this era. Most Doctor Who runs, you have that one story, that just clicks with you and makes you understand the thought processes of the creative decisions. With Matt Smith, even though it's not a story that I particularly looked at fondly, retroactively, it's The Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone. With David Tennant, for me personally, it was Smith and Jones. With Christopher Eccleston, it was Rose. Tom Baker, it was Robot. William Hartnell is Unearthly Child. Mostly it's the first story, but sometimes, like Colin Baker, it's Attack of the Cybermen. With Sylvester McCoy, it's Remembrance of the Daleks. It's not always the first story you go to, but for me, this is the story which I recommend for newcomers to the 12th Doctor. If you want to get into 12th Doctor, this is the story I recommend, because it plays to Capaldi's strengths as he portrays the Doctor in Series 8. Because Series 8 Doctor, though there is a whole thing about soldiers, which we'll have to talk about regarding his relationship with a particular character in this story. But the main thing about the Doctor is, in this incarnation, is that he, unlike most Doctors where they seem to just stumble on adventures and our Doctor is just going in it for fun and he protects life because, he demands, because he just loves life and he wants to fight. The 12th Doctor is kind of different here, and this is a great example of what makes the 12th Doctor. The 12th Doctor goes on adventures. He basically has he's a very similar Doctor to later 7th Doctor, in which his adventures are kind of carefully picked. He goes on adventures, especially like Killing the Moon, with his relationship with Courtney Woods, and now this one with Clara, as we learn throughout the story, is that he kind of deliberately picked an adventure that he knew that something was going to happen, essentially. And he kind of manipulates Clara into seeing the viewpoint that he so desperately wants. If it's, see her showing like her full potential, even though that kind of backfired at the end of Kill the Moon, or like if it's this story, he's trying to actually kind of, it's great because it's all up in really the interpretation. But for me personally, I believe that the 12th Doctor was kind of pushing Clara away. There's a great scene where he's about to knock on her door, but then he doesn't. And later on, he kind of brings that up when Clara, he basically learned that Clara went on her own little adventure trying to find out what's going on. And he kind of is like, well, what should I have done? Should I have knocked on your door and woke you up and took you on an adventure? I thought you don't want that anymore. And there's so many great moments with the Doctor and Clara in this story. I mean, I'm already talking, I may as well just get into the adventure at hand. So one great, just absolutely amazing is Paul's directing the script by James McEdam, and also the production, as we are invited into this train, which is perfectly replicated a 1920s train of the Orient Express from the novel. And so it's, it's really cool, and the style, the aesthetic, the costumes, everything about it is stunning. Also, personal note, that doctor costume in the story, he doesn't wear his particular costume, he has this kind of strange, I can't remember what they're called, but the first and third Doctors used to wear them as kind of like a stringy bow tie. It suits Capaldi so well. And he wore a similar thing in Deep Breath. Why can't that be the official costume of 12? It looks gorgeous on Capaldi. But there's so many great scenes between them. But before I get into that, the aesthetics of it, the costumes, I like as well as also always hints behind the scenes. Maybe somebody's got like a cybernetic eye, or something odd, like a chair with cybernetic enhancements, that keeps you in the mindset that this is set in the future and this is in space. And it actually utilises it very well. One of my favourite little details is actually a cameo appearance from the singer Foxes. I don't know really much of the singer. I don't know like most of her discography. However, here she is playing like a 1920s jazz version of Queen's Don't Stop Me Now. And that is just so gorgeous. It just fits into the atmosphere, but it's also a song that's clearly not from the 1920s. It's one of the most memorable songs from its time, from the 1980s. I think it's 1989, if my memory serves me correctly. And it's just like, that's just a cool little detail. But like, if it was like set in 1920s, you couldn't do that. But because it's set in the future, and this is like a tribute to 1920s, you can get away with that, and it's so cool. I love as well later on when it's basically revealed what's happening and we go back into a much more sci-fi looking environment. It's basically the same set, but they redecorate it. And the claustrophobic of this story, like you can clearly see that they've saved a lot of money making this story, but also as well, it looks fantastic and does look like they've shoved a lot of money in it as well. Like, it's just really incredible. But let's get into the narrative, because the story itself really is fascinating. Essentially, there's this creature, the Foretold, which appears as a mummy. And essentially, you see it. Somebody sees it, but nobody else can see it apart from you. And whoever sees it, in 66 seconds, you die. Specifically 66 seconds. And like an Agatha Christie novel, people get picked one by one as everybody's trying to work together to try and figure out who is the murderer per se, and tries to figure out what's going on, and trying to connect the dots essentially. And I love this kind of detective work when Doctor Who does like detectives. Really just fits with the franchise. And the scenes of the mummy are so well utilised. It's one of the few stories that has a non-diegetic visual storytelling device, with a clock device in the, I don't know which way it is from your point of view, but there's a clock on the screen, and it actually shows you in real time, showing you that from when the mummy appears to when the people die, it's 66 seconds. This is a great visual storytelling to get across the threat. And when we see characters who we like later on see the Foretold, we do generally start panicking, because it's like, oh my god, we've only got like a few moments to find out any clues, any information we can, and try and get that information to our characters, to the rest of the characters. And this also brings out a darker aspect to our main character, the Doctor, and kind of pushes him to push Clara to do something that she's kind of uncomfortable with. But yeah, that visual storytelling is great. Now, we have a few characters along the way. Now, this is a one-parter, and a lot of issues with a lot of one-parters in the revived era, specifically the 12th Doctor, is that they're too short. Some stories have so much great ideas, so much storytelling there, and so many characters as well. One of the big issues with the 12th Doctor is that they introduce so many characters in such a short time. This story should have been a two-parter, but for some reason wasn't, because the series was doing this whole like 8-episode, series 8 was like one episode is a single story. Don't know why. It was a really stupid decision in my opinion, because we have these characters and they're absolutely great. We have these great characters who are suspicious, and we get interested in them, and they're played by phenomenal actors, but because they share such little screen time, we couldn't have gotten invested in them as we would with any other Doctor Who adventures. But let's start off with Parkins, played by famous comedian Frank Skinner. Parkins is this really strange character who's clearly supposed to be the redhead in, the character who the audience is kind of suspectful of being the bad guy, and he kind of knows this. And there's scenes where the Doctor's just like kind of like in his face about, because there's one bit where he asks for information about the train and and the engines, and Parkins basically gets all of his information to the doctor really quickly, and the doctor's like, that's too quickly, and he's like, oh yes, I must be the murderer. Oh, I was already looking into this. Now, Frank Skinner is an icon in British television, at least in 2013. You don't really hear much of him. He's mainly known for his comedic work. He's a comedian first and foremost. Now, when I first watched this story back in 2014, I must be honest, I didn't actually know who he was, but his portrayal in this story is so strange. I've never seen acting like this. It's so, I think it's on purpose, because, you know, he's supposed to be this really strange character. He's kind of timid, but also he's like, he doesn't really show it as well. He's kind of quiet, and he kind of presents himself as somebody who would go out to kill someone, but he's actually like a really nice guy at heart, and the Doctor even like really befriends him throughout the story, and he has this kind of strange look with him, and like, you'd never, if you didn't know who he was, you would have never guessed he was a comedian. Yeah, sure, he has some fun lines here and there, but nothing like too like out of the ordinary in terms of Doctor Who humour. It's a really strange portrayal, but I actually kind of like it. It kind of makes him stand out a bit more compared to other characters, especially, like I said, the screen time he gets. We also have Captain Uel, played by David Barber, and he does a really great job. He's basically the captain of the train, and there's a scene where basically the Doctor's trying to explain, and he basically tries to cover up these murders, basically tries to hide the fact, but he's also the kind of the soldier. He's seen battle, he's seen war, but he wants this life to be just quiet. He basically just wants to sit down, rest, put his head under, and he just wants to stay out of everyone's way, and just hope that nothing goes wrong, and if something goes wrong, just say it's an accident and get along with it, follow procedure and trying to have like an easy life. But this kind of situation pushes him to basically reveal himself to the Doctor, and he basically becomes one of the suspects as well. And the Doctor first kind of thinks it's like might be something up, but after the third death, one of the waiters, the captain basically is like, right, Doctor, 3 deaths, that's what it takes apparently for me to get off my arse and trying to actually solve the mystery rather than hide it. We also have then as well Professor Morehouse, which the Doctor recognises as a mythological teacher of sorts, like he studies mythology, and he basically is where the Doctor gets most of his information about the Foretold, this legend of a strange mummy that only appears to people just before their death, and apparently, according to myths, according to legends, you die 66 seconds after you see him. There's apparently a word or saying to stop the Foretold, but people don't know what it is. They've tried bargaining with it, they've tried giving riches to it, but it just goes after them and kills them anyway. A strange, kind of dull reading on this story. There's a bit where the Doctor, one of the big reveals of it is like he realises that everyone there is kind of the experts in their fields. There's a line earlier on about how there's more than there's loads of doctors and students, and not students, but like professors of fields on this trip, and the Doctor kind of works out that was kind of deliberate, and it doesn't really work here because we only really meet one character that does feel like he would be perfectly selected for the role, and that's Professor Morris, who spoiler warning, gets killed. I love that scene where he starts off, like I said, the tension in it really works because you have that click and talk in the corner, and he's trying to help out, but then the fear and the panic gets on with him, and he's just like, right, just come on, please, I'll worship you, I'll help you, I'll give you money, just please don't kill me, just bargain. And the doctor's just like, no, you're wasting time, don't do this, it's completely useless, it helps no one, you're going to die, just accept the fact and try and get us some information. And that, of course, leads into one of the most interesting aspect of this story, and that is the Doctor's relationship with people who are about to die in this story. Essentially, basically what we learn is that this character, Gus, voiced by John Session, who basically is like this intercom, but we basically learn he's a sentient being, whether he's a AI or whether he's an actual person doing like a voice into the system, who's to say, but essentially he's set up this, he's discovered this scroll, and near it is where the foretold appears, and essentially he's trying to get these people to study it so that they can use it for their own ends, Gus's own ends. And the Doctor kind of realizes like they're trapped in, it's like if they don't do anything, if they don't try and stop the foretold, they're all just going to die anyway. And so the Doctor kind of blankly like ignores any sort of concerns with any human character in the story, and it's completely blunt with them. When characters start dying, he's just like, it's great because it's not great for you, but it's great for me and us, as we can try and get more information. When you see it, you can tell us what it's like, what it's doing, you can get us information that we could possibly use to help to save the next person. And that's actually a really interesting dynamic, especially how it affects Clara. Now, strangely, how this story is structured, Clara is mainly out of the action for a bit, as she befriends this woman whose mother or grandmother, character's a grandmother, but she calls her mother because of reasons that are explained in the story. And this woman, she kind of feels guilt. The mother or grandmother character is the first person to get killed by the foretold on the Orient Express, and she kind of has this overwhelming guilt of it because she kind of really hates this woman. There's this great scene where she's talking to Clara, Clara befriends her, and she's basically explaining, and it's just like, I've dreamt of killing her, never meant to, not really, not at least I don't think so. And now that she has died, I kind of feel really guilty, and it's kind of made me a bit unstable, and she wants to see the body, but Gus refuses to open the door. But when they do find the door, that's a good point, she never actually finds her grandmother / mother's body. I never noticed, I remember, I just realised that. But you do get to see this sarcophagus, which Gus wants them to put the foretold in for safekeeping, shall we say. And essentially through Clara and his character, they get locked in this room for the majority of the story, and they're basically completely out of the action for the majority of the story. And they talk about their relationship with this grandmother character and the Doctor. And I really love these scenes. They're so well executed, so well written. I especially like how Clara, there's a great bit of writing when Clara is just like, this is a farewell adventure, farewell, because you can't just end things on slamming the door and frustrating. And this character, this woman, she's like, yes you can, you do it all the time, unless, you can't give up, unless you can't stop this lifestyle, unless you're kind of addicted to this. And Clara kind of realizes, it's like, oh yeah, maybe like my emotions are so like skewered. And there's a great moment then when later on in the story, when Clara is allowed to leave the room to try and get some more information about the foretold, the Doctor essentially tells Clara that he will not be able to save her. She is essentially a test subject for the Doctor to work on, which seems a bit dark, but I think it actually really works for the character at the moment. And even if you aren't, there is actually a kind of explanation at the end of the story, which actually does fit the Doctor's character in this, and kind of works in terms of the grand scheme of things. And the Doctor is just like, no, I'm not going to save her. However, you know, we need to get her there. And Clara, he basically tells Clara, it's like, just lie to her, tell her that you're going to save, that I'm going to save her, if that's what it takes for her to convince her to come and see the Doctor. And that's what Clara does. She lies to this woman to get her to come. She's basically turned into the Doctor, manipulating people's emotions to try and save and fix as many things as they can, even put in human lives and human's choice at the forefront, at the risk of human life and human choice. And Clara, even is like, you've made me your accomplice, that you've made me lie. And that character in the back is like, sorry, what did you lie about? Now, there's a great moment where she starts seeing the foretold, and the Doctor comes up with this plan. He basically absorbs, also as well that the foretold hunts down like the weakest first, and then like slowly makes his way to the more healthier subjects. And because this woman seemingly is the least healthiest person there, because of her mental state, the Doctor has this kind of scanner device and puts her grief and her anguish into the Doctor. Now, the Doctor should have already had like so much grief and so much turmoil on his conscience already anyway, in my opinion. But he basically scans her and sends all this information into him, so that now the foretold thinks that the Doctor is this woman. And the Doctor, and you have that time in the corner, so you know that the Doctor only has 66 seconds to figure out what's going on. And that scene, the editing, the directing, the acting from Capaldi really nails it. And I really like it's up to really the audience whether this was the Doctor's plan overall, or whether the Doctor came up with this idea on the spot, an idea and a very risky move, but he kind of like lashed out at the last of it because he really didn't want to see another death on his conscience, and he just came up with like a quick idea which put his life in jeopardy just so he can like save the day. And they basically learned that the mummy isn't a mummy of sorts, it's a soldier, and the magical words for it to stop is "we surrender." We basically learn that the soldier has been kept alive by alien technology, and it's basically because of this alien technology, it's been keeping it alive and alive and alive to the point where it's been mummified to a sort and doesn't actually have a physical form anymore, and it has to basically survive off absorbing other people, completely draining their life source. Essentially a vampire, if you will, metaphorically speaking. And Gus then is just like, well done, you saved the day. However, I'm afraid survivors aren't necessary to this plot, so we're going to suffocate everyone. Kind of a cop-out. Everybody kind of passes out, and Clara then like wakes up after the train seemingly explodes, and the Doctor basically explains that he saved everybody. And that's really, you know, it kind of feels like a kind of cop-out. But there is it does lead into a kind of funny joke where the Doctor's just like, no, I just saved you and let everyone else there to die. Ha 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 ha. But then it leads into a scene where the Doctor basically explains to himself that what he did, first of all, he kind of explains like, I didn't tell you the truth. I wanted to show like Gus like a more darker side of me, because I didn't want him to see like my true plans, because I wanted to trick Gus. And it's like, that kind of makes sense, because, you know, Gus is the main bad guy in the story. I like to think, however, this interpretation, which I think it kind of works, is that at this point the Doctor kind of knew that Clara was sick of him, and Clara Clara's struggling with, keeping with the Doctor or letting him go. And the Doctor basically put her in a purposely uncomfortable position to try and get her to basically make up her mind to leave him. That's my interpretation. You can see it like that, where the Doctor's kind of like, he's put her through this, not because he hates her, but because he really cares for her and knows that, this life is dangerous, it is preposterous, and, people do die with no way of saving people. And he's kind of pushing Clara to see more of that, so Clara could make up more of her mind on her leaving, make it much more easier for her, per se. I really like that interpretation. This, of course, leads into the main line of the story, which is sometimes you only have bad decisions, but you still have to choose. And that basically sums up the ideas of the story. And Clara, and the story ends with Clara phoning Danny. Basically, it's like, yes, I've cancelled with the Doctor. Only for Clara hang up and tell the Doctor's like, you know what, he's actually fine with it. He said he wasn't comfortable with it at first and it was his idea to leave. But actually, you know what, he's changed his mind, he's happy with it. And come on, let's go and see everything. Let's go and see the stars. Show us everything. Let me continue travelling with you. I love Capaldi's grin when Clara says that. And they go off on their adventures. It's just phenomenally, just well put, well delivered right there. And that is Mummy on the Orient Express. Now, two things to note before I get into the main conclusion. One, this story sets up Gus as this mystery. We don't ever know who Gus is. Gus is also left like hanging like who he is, and the Doctor tries to find out but doesn't. I love the fact, I am so happy we never found out who Gus was. Think about it, it's still a Doctor Who mystery. It's not like to build up a storyline, a story arc. It's just this mystery the Doctor still doesn't know, and we don't know. And that's just so, we never see that anymore. Like, I hate the fact that everything has to be explained now. What really matters in terms of the context of the story is the Doctor and Clara's relationship, and second to that, them trying to save as many lives as physically possible. That's the main motive. That's the main, what should drive the story and drive the characters. We didn't need to know who Gus is, and we don't. And that's just really refreshing to see. But also second, The Foretold technically has another sort of canonical appearance in a YouTube video of Peter Capaldi as the 12th Doctor at the Doctor Who expedition, and the kids get to see the Foretold, and then there's this interview. Highly recommended. It's absolutely gorgeous. He does an interview with the kids, but he does it in character. One of my favourite bits in that interview is one of them asks him who's his favourite companion, and the Doctor says, like, I've had so many. My granddaughter Susan, she's particularly special to me. And he kind of gets tear-eyed as he's kind of like, I always told her that I would go back, but I never did. And it's generally as if somebody actually asked him like the seriously personal question. Props to Peter Capaldi for like keeping in character for that. So anyway, that two out of the way. Mummy on the Orient Express is an underrated gem. It's a story, just a fantastic episode, and probably one of the first great, brilliant, amazing stories in the 12th Doctor era. So awesome, highly recommended from me. So join me next time when the Doctor is trapped within his own TARDIS, as Clara has to become the main adventure, has to basically become the Doctor in the adventure. She leads a handful of people to defeat strange alien beings from an alternative dimension. So join me next time for Flatline, and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra.